Have you ever considered how powerful a thriving community can be for your business? Hello, action takers. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the IDKWTF I Was Doing podcast. My neurospicy co host, Teresa Merrick, and I, David B., are on a mission to help you create income from your interests, even when you're not quite sure what the heck you're doing. And today, we're diving into part two of our chat with the brilliant Venia Logan as we outline the exact steps to building an engaged and healthy online community. If you didn't see part one, Venia is the community architect and founder of SociallyConstructed.online, the agency who helps corporations and startups thrive by expanding their community engagement using proven frameworks and science-backed methods. So, if you've struggled with fostering genuine connections online, you're in the right place. Here in part two, we start out discussing the huge impact the pandemic had on our view of communities and how it's accelerated online spaces becoming essential for creating real, healthy connections with others. Venia also shares insights on the critical role these spaces play as the primary source of information for most people and why it's the responsibility of the community manager to ensure information inside of it is healthy and accurate. And finally, we'll delve into the depth of Venia's business with not just the successes, but also her number one current struggle, and then explore some potential solutions. So if you've been grappling with how to navigate the new waters of online communities, or if you're wanting to ensure the health and accuracy of your space, this episode is for you. Be sure to listen to the full thing because we're unpacking all of this and more. Teresa and I are here to walk you through it all as your two supportive partners rooting for your success, sharing tips, tricks, and interviews just like this to help you along the way. So buckle up and hit that subscribe button because action takers, you're in exactly the right place to learn, grow, and turn your interests into income. So let's dive in. Have you ever started something new and didn't finish it?
You were excited. You invested time and money.
You got stuck.
I'm Teresa Merrick.
And I'm David B.
And this is the podcast with two ADHD entrepreneurs, and we've been there.
And worked with hundreds of people in the exact same place.
The IDKWTF I Was Doing podcast will take you away from feelings of frustration and overwhelm.
And lead you to the clarity you need to take action and get shit done.
Listen today because it's important to admit that no one really knows
what the fuck they're doing.
So over the last 3 years, how would you say, since you are very active in the field of online communities, how do you feel it's changed since pre and post pandemic?
Oh, that's rough. Yeah. So there's the elephant in the room on that question, right? COVID happened and virtual spaces became primary spaces almost overnight.
Yeah.
We always viewed them as tertiary spaces. There's your primary space, which is your home. And then there's your secondary space, which is where you spend the lion's share of your time, usually work. And then there's tertiary spaces, the places where you spend social outings, bars, places like that. And tertiary spaces disappeared. And originally they were online spaces, right? Online became our work and became our home lives and became our social lives. And it's really the first time that a lot of analog natives and especially millennials who are bridging that gap had to deal with the fact that a virtual space is now a primary, secondary, and tertiary space, which caused a lot of problems. There was a lot of anxiety, a lot of concerns. We talk about Zoom burnout, the incredible amount of economic exchanging. Virtually no one is in the position they were in 2019 anymore. And all of that caused a technological solution for online community to become the de facto solution. So the tech space exploded and we got a whole bunch of incredible tools that now don't really know what they're doing. They're a little bit miasmic because we're starting to discover that technological solutions to virtual world problems don't necessarily work. In fact, we have the richest man in the world learning in real time how hard community is, right?
Yes, we do. And we all get to watch it.
It's one of my favorite dramas. I try and stay out of all these, but it's...
Yeah.
Well, you can't help it even if you don't immerse yourself in watching it or participating in it. You hear about these things.
Exactly. So how do you handle that? We're currently in a downturn with the technology industry. Community was in a boom and now it's in a bust. So, like, where exactly is the health of our virtual worlds going from here forward? I think this is the reckoning where we start to realize that the online communities we've built are not so much about the technology and the tasks and the money involved. And we're starting to recognize that virtual worlds are cultures, just like real worlds are cultures.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting because I'll go through like social media cleanses every so often where I'll just get rid of I don't delete my profile, but I'll get rid of the apps on my phone. I'll get rid of the Facebook app and Instagram. And I feel lonely and isolated because I don't have all of the people that I know just immediately accessible. And it's a really interesting feeling. And that's not something I've ever felt before, you know?
And you know what's funny? There is some research to back this. I won't go into this too much. Link me for references. I have a Discord. You can totally roast me about references at a later time. But there is research to back and confirm that outside of most walled garden platforms, which are largely algorithm based and run, they're also very content and asset and task oriented. Most walled garden platforms expedite that loneliness, but outside of the walled garden, in open source communities, in traditional BBS system, in some Web3 communities, the data's still coming in, but in traditional online community passages, that's not a thing. Like, people on IRC are absolutely friends with one another. You can completely replace your friends group with online people if you want to. And there's this notion of community health in virtual spaces. MMOs are a great example. Guild Wars 2. I actually actively studied this role-playing guild on Guild Wars 2 where they created weekly scenarios in the game that didn't otherwise exist. And in a lot of ways, that was a cure for the loneliness that they suffered on Facebook and Twitter.
Interesting.
I mean, social media, it just has become such a part of how I function in my daily life. But I mean, I have kids who are 14, almost 12, almost 10. And I have told them, like, let's just not social media. You don't need it right now. And I'm deterring them away from it mostly because these particular formats can be so heavy and toxic and it's hard enough to be a teenager anyway. And so it's very interesting navigating this space and all the versions of it where you can participate in the variety of online communities. So
Yeah, that Tony Stark meme, I've successfully privatized world peace. It also applies to social media. We have successfully abstracted human interaction. We don't really want to look toward that, right? But that's what we've done. We have successfully abstracted human interaction.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
big topic there. Not social media. Everybody has an opinion about it.
Yeah. I can go into it if you like. I have this big thing about how important and critical it is for you to manage and understand how your information diet works because institutional trust, the traditional media that we had, was by and large taking care of that for us. So throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, since the war and moving into the world of MTV and pop culture, the traditional media made it so that we didn't have to navigate our information diets because we were already in abundance of information. And it's because of that that when social media, Facebook, and Twitter came onto the stage and completely destroyed institutional trust, no one, analog natives, digital natives, millennials, children, no one had the skills necessary to properly manage and navigate their information diet. But technology kept saying, that's not our role. That's not our role. I'm like, yeah, but you wholesale replaced traditional media. It has to be your role. We don't have a system here. And there's this report that I follow on a yearly basis. It started in 2000 by Edelman's PR company. It's an international PR firm and it's called the Edelman's Trust Barometer. And what it studies and measures via this survey of 30,000 people all over the world is to what degree and how does the general public in an individual country trust the institutions in that country? And it started by saying, in relation to government, how is business trusted? In relation to nonprofits, well, how are for-profits trusted? And now it's become this incredible gauge for socio-political health because for the first time in 2021, for the first time, for-profit businesses were trusted more than any other public institution. Governments, nonprofits, education, academia, journalism, all less. And now we live in a world where we trust CEOs more on social justice issues than we do our own governance.
That's rough.
Breakdown of the information diet.
I don't know if I trust any of them.
Me either, but it's
I didn't think if I.
it's hard. It is. I mean, probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I stopped watching the news because I was like, I can't mentally handle the load. It's always so negative. It's everything that's heavy about the world, and I just can't. But it's like, now how do I get it? Well, because if I'm not watching the news, if something big enough happens, social media tells me very quickly. Someone says something, and I'll go, oh, but I'm sure I miss things that I would like to know about. And I'm sure I see things, I definitely know I see things that I'm like, I have no interest in this. I don't need to read this. I don't.
Right. And that kind of brings it full circle, right? Because the ways that you get exposed to information are just as important as the information that you choose to consume and then learn more about. And that's the two parts of your information diet. What's available? So what's your grocery store carry? And then what are you choosing to eat? And what are you buying long-term in your food? And information is the same, right? But there's this concept in pop culture and communication theory called media agenda setting theory. And that's the notion that by controlling the prophetic grocery store of your information diet, the media was capable of setting the agenda for what mattered. And when 24-hour news cycle came up, everything became important. So nothing did. And that's what led to this algorithmic reduction, this freedom of information, where no technological algorithm wants to limit that. But by virtue of being an algorithm, they are delivering you your grocery store. And there are no rules. Traditional media had the FCC. We don't have that in a virtual space. So how do you manage that? And by and large, bringing it back full circle, it is up to your community managers. It's up to the people who manage, foster, grow, and maintain the spaces where you get your information. And again, we don't have an education platform. I'm trying to make one, socially constructed, right? We don't have an education platform for such a hefty, big burden for an accidental community manager. We fall into our roles.
Yeah.
And now we're expected to manage the information diet of all of our members.
Well, it's interesting, and you saying all that and thinking about, the 24-hour news cycle. And then there were no more boundaries. There were no more, that the hour news cycle was a boundary of how do we get the most important information into these people at the 6 o'clock news for 1 hour. And even if we repeat it again at the 10 o'clock news, like, we're giving these people who can hop onto TV for real in live, because that's before we had recordings of everything, before we had social media, where we had 1 hour. And then, it became 24 hours. And then there's no that membrane you talked about, that boundary. In this case, it was time. What is the most important to fit into this much time? But then when there was no more boundary, everything became important. And gosh, when I think about you delivering me an actual grocery store, I'm like, oh, please don't.
I know,
But
right?
that's what we get with information, and it is the same. So, oh my gosh. Okay, well, let's take a quick break. I love this. I'm fascinated. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Have you ever started something new that you were really excited about and invested time or money into, but after doing it for a while, you reach a point and you just feel like, I have no idea what the F I'm doing?
There's that bubbling up of frustration because you're not quite as good as you thought you'd be, or it's nowhere near as easy as you expected. Then suddenly, a wave of guilt comes at the same time, and you don't really want to or feel like you can express this to anyone.
Having a dream you want to accomplish can be very sad and isolating. It's lonely because visionaries tend to see the world the way that it could be, instead of settling for the way the world currently is, like most people do.
We believe this so deeply that we wrote a book with the exact 4 steps to help.
This guide is designed to take you out of that feeling of frustration and overwhelm and lead you into the calmness and clarity that you need to reach the life that you know in your heart you're destined to have.
If you've started a project or a goal but have stopped gotten stuck or are starting to feel burned out, this is 100% the book for you.
Go to IDKWTFpodcast.com today and download your digital copy with the coupon code ACTION to get it on us, because we want to join you and be your supportive friends and partners throughout your journey.
It's only free for a limited time if you use the code ACTION by going to our website, IDKWTFpodcast.com.
Check it out today and let's get unstuck together. Welcome back. Oh my gosh, I am so filled with information, and I really see how all of the information we just talked about with social media and just how the world works in this space, and how every community has a community manager, whether they know it or not, and whether we're aware of it or not. If we're part of any community, there is someone behind the scenes managing it, or multiple someones, depending on the situation. And so, Venia, that comes back to, let's talk a little bit more about you and your business and what you have to offer, because we need your help with community management. We really do.
Absolutely. And honestly, I created Socially Constructed for this reason. We've covered so many topics and it's so difficult. I give this advice to all of my clients. I start every single presentation that I give, I start all of my courses with it. The name of the game here is to plan big, know these things, right? But that's super overwhelming. So do me a favor, start small, right? Plan big, start small. Feel comfortable being like, oh, I don't know this thing, so I'll shot in the dark, give it a go. And that mistake, whatever happens, whatever goes wrong, is going to make a better plan. And your plan big, that's going to get better simply by taking individual steps. And that's one of the big things that I think you need help with as a general community management career. I really believe that any community builder in their position, doesn't matter what you do in community management, you need a person in your back pocket to bounce those ideas off of and say, here's my big plan. And then that person goes, great, but what's this small thing? And then you're like, yeah, great question. Let me go find out real quick. And then they make a mistake and then you come back and it's like, oh, okay, so new plan. And it's not really a new plan. It's a better plan, right?
Yeah, it's just upgraded.
What I do,
Excellent.
It is such a great and noble vision, because everything you said right before our last break was that so many of us fall into it, becoming community managers, just because we were the ones there and we're not necessarily good at it. And we didn't necessarily start with that vision. So it's such a noble thing you're doing to create a more healthy social media community environment. The long-term goal of that is everything we need and could fix so many of the issues that we have in our world right now, right?
Yeah.
So with your business, tell us, what are some of the things going really well for you?
Yeah. So I can say I launched 2 courses in the space of a month. So I'm taking a break. So the first one was, so in my business, the structure that I have is to co-create with my Discord community 4 primary educational resources that go from starting an online community to building, fostering, and growing it, right? So what I did was I created a workbook called the Confidently Build a Magnetic Brand Workbook. And essentially, I reworked all of the traditional brand exercises. I reworked the customer avatar to actually work for community long-term. I reworked the brand identity blueprint to actually show values that your community can co-create with you to make a wearable brand. And then I created an e-course out of it. And then the second workbook, that's actually starting day after tomorrow. Oh, that's terrifying. Day after tomorrow, we build the platform. We build the ship with which to sail, What is that going to look like? What's the technology that you need? How do you build the community from very, very small and organic to large and structured? How do you do that? So workbook 2 is building a platform. And then we start over, because you built a brand and then you built the system for that brand, but that doesn't mean that you've built a community. You've built an audience in that regard. So now we need to chart the waters of that community, right? So we build a community charter that's composed of your community strategy, your community playbook. How can your community members engage in your online community? What are the standard operating procedures? And then lastly, your community guidelines. And what I don't think a lot of people realize is you can write guidelines in half a page, but it's one thing to write good guidelines. It's an entirely new thing to master that skill. So that's your third thing, which is your community charter. And then the fourth workbook is measuring, fostering, and growing your online community. So how do you measure it social scientifically, understand the community, and abstract what's happening in your community to the ROI that proves people should help sustain. So each of those four workbooks I've been producing, and I figured it would take me 4 years, 1 year per book, right? But then I also have like these other really small pieces of content. Like, great, it's one thing to be able to measure your community, but what are the actual key performance indicators you need? How exactly are you going to measure your time on page, your support deflection, your net promoter score system? There's a whole bunch of these metrics out. So I created this free course that's out now, actually, which is all about actually measuring your online community health using 3 What's in it for me dashboards. All of that's been going fantastic.
Nice. And you got it all done.
Great. No, I mean, it
Wow.
sounds great. And you sound so organized in these ways. It's like the big plan you were talking about. It's the big plan.
Yeah.
And I will say, just for everyone listening, I was going through it earlier today, and you put so much work and effort. It's not just like, nowadays there's so many just online courses out there where everyone can just put any information wherever, but it's detailed. You have like worksheets, you've got notes, you've got links. It is a wonderful, beautiful, and it's free. It's wild.
Link in the description.
Yes, absolutely. Check it out.
I'm willing to bet that the next question is the ever so foreboding what's not working.
Exactly.
Hey, it's
So
okay
yeah,
though. That's what our show is about, is
Exactly.
looking at what's not working and why, and not being afraid, which I love that you have shown us you really are not afraid. The first thing you've said it multiple times is have fun and just go do it. Take action. So, of course, stuff's not going to work. So, it's okay. This is a safe space for you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I can say the macro trend of community is not looking great this year. I have full confidence that it's going to recover. I really do. And I have to weather storms, right? But first and foremost, I started this as a consultancy, and with technology layoffs, community was the first to get hit. Normally, the first 2 departments to go are your community development and then your research and development arms. So usually it's the software engineers and the community managers that go. I was reading David Spiegel's Decide and Conquer, and there was one big thing that he said where one of the most common issues for CEOs and founders of small and large businesses is that when they need to cut costs, when they need to do layoffs, one, they don't do it enough because they're really, really worried. They don't hold on that. And it's better to have 1 giant layoff than 2 or 3 or 4 repetitive ones, right? But when they do those layoffs, they also go, which roles are the ones that are not making us money? And they lay off those people first. Community, research and development. They want to look good on paper in the event that they need to fundraise, right? So the salespeople stay, the marketing people stay, although not as long as the salespeople, right? And then the administrative roles never get touched because the administrative roles, they must be making money. But in all reality, oftentimes they're the ones responsible for the red tape that you can't have when you're in an emergency, right? So oftentimes as a consultant working with these companies, they start to get this, I'm trying to remember the name of the phenomenon that happens, delayed discounting rate. So there's this concept of when money gets tight and the long term becomes less plausible, you have to be pragmatic on the short term. And that short term decision, the longer term items depreciate in value, despite the fact that they are still valuable. They feel less valuable because you need to be focusing on short term tasks. And that's what crashes communities and companies and research departments and research and development options. And that's what's happening in our industry, right? So what's my big failure? I have no idea and no clue. I can tout till the end of the cows come home what the problem is. How do you fix that? I I don't know as a consultant how to keep my clients and how to convince executive C-suites that maintaining the consultancies are viable. So I've had to like completely pivot since October of last year. Like I said, I build these communities for clients. Half of my clients got either laid off or lost consulting funds. I can't be in their, you know, and that's one of the big areas of failure that I've had in the past year. Truth be told, I could use some advice, like how.
Yeah. Personally, what I see is that what you're doing is the right thing to do, which is expanding your brand. Because if it's contracting everywhere else, more and more people are going to be pulling back and doing something different. But what you're doing is perfect, which is getting courses out there, getting smaller clients, focusing on maybe different types of communities and pivoting and just getting more exposure. Because like they say, everything cycles. Just because it's expanding right now, it's going to boom, maybe in 4 months or maybe when the next wave of something else happens, right? So I see that you're doing the right things immediately.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. Because then when you have small businesses or someone who's just starting their own business, because so many people are, because of that exact reason, because we're all expendable. And it was true before COVID hit, but like it's become even more. And so people are like, oh, well, I want to start my own source of income, but they need to know how to be a community manager. And they may not have the same funds, they may not be able to, but if you have e-courses and things like that that people can plug into, and they're a reasonable price for, someone who's, hey, I'm trying to start up my own thing and I want to have the best community I can have, you're in that space. I don't know many people that are in a space similar to yours where I can go get a free e-course, I can go get some resources and then dive in a little deeper and work with you and talk with you and learn how to create my own community. They're going to refer back to you because you're the one in the space.
And you're better than all the other people who are in that space as well.
Oh, that definitely helps with the imposter syndrome for sure.
So yeah, you got to just look at and two, when you have some of these bigger projects, you're like, these are going to take me, maybe a year to fully go through. It's what other smaller projects, what other can you put the ebooks out first before there's some big, attached training with them, which sure, training is coming. But training might be coming in, 2024, like for this ebook. But that's okay because if that's all I have, I might be like, hey, I want to buy these 4 ebooks from Venia for whatever package you have. And, maybe it's 4 ebooks and a 1-hour consulting. And then I have somewhere to start.
Yeah.
And then when you come out with those workshops, I'm going to be like, yes, those were so helpful. I'm going to go pay for this course because I'm sure I'm just going to get that much more value out of it.
It makes me feel a lot better knowing that I'm like on the right track there, But I mean, it's hard. It's real hard recently. So I feel for anyone starting a business right now, especially in tech and especially one that's community driven and community led.
Because you know that communities will never go away. They might just go to different places.
Yeah.
But
Diasporas exist. Communities do not destroy themselves, they emigrate.
Absolutely. They exist. We can find them.
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh.
what do you have any final words of wisdom for our avid listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. The name of the game right now in the modern world, in a lack of institutional trust, businesses don't necessarily care so much about your academia as they do your experiences, but you still need to learn, right? So the best answer for that is to co-create, co-iteratively learn, be a part of a community. And I would love it if it was mine. SociallyConstructed.online. You can go to the community tab. You'll see the Discord channel. We're running a book club. And the YouTube channel is also where all of that co-created and co-iterative learning space finds itself ultimately. So be sure to subscribe there. And even if it's not me, there are 1,000 other online community creators who are absolutely phenomenal. And they're all building co-creative spaces for you to co-iteratively learn. we are trying really hard to make a better virtual world. And a big part of that is bringing back trust in the same institutions that work. Those institutions are just going to look very different. Academia now looks like co-created online communities.
So that is absolutely wonderful. So thanks again, Venia, for hanging out with us. And thanks again to all of our wonderful listeners of the IDKWTF podcast. Be sure to check out all the links in the show notes below because
Yes.
it's all right there.
Action takers, click the links. Go check it out. You won't regret it.
Love that. Are we still saying doobly-doo, or is that just me showing my age? I love that word. Vlog Brothers. Yeah, they created a name for the description because they were tired of saying link in the description. So they call it a doobly-doo.
Thank you so much, Venia. Everyone, thanks for listening. Have a really great day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. This has been the conclusion of our 2-part series.
And hey, congrats for making it here.
If you didn't happen to catch part 1, just go back to the previous episode to get the full story.
It was a really good one.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider liking, subscribing, and/or reviewing us on wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Also, if there's someone you know who clearly doesn't know what the fuck they're doing and would benefit from this topic, please hit that share button and send them this episode.
Let's normalize the feeling of uncertainty.
Asking for help and admitting that we don't know
What the fuck we're doing either.